It's a real pleasure to be with you today. Thanks for coming. I want to share with you for the next 45 minutes. I know we're billed for about an hour and 15 minutes. And unless you're going to do some of that talking, I'm not sure we can do that, right? But I'm happy to kick off the conversation with many of you. I think we've got some important stories to tell because they're founded in a lot of the use cases, the case studies of a number of our customers. And so customer case studies are always interesting and always important for us, particularly in this social media landscape, nothing more than a technology that's really beginning to sharpen the focus of a lot of what we do. So with that said, let me make sure that we've got the right lens. We are all PR professionals in here, correct? Right? So with that said, this notion of influence, in fact, I was speaking with Shanali Burke this morning. She said, you know, influencer marketing really isn't anything new. Let's just be clear, guys. As PR professionals, you've spent a career trying to help your clients be influential. That's what you do. You are the storytellers. But what I'd like to cover today are opportunities for you to really take that storytelling to the next to the next level. Because I do believe it's a brand new marketplace. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So first, how many folks believe that we're in this new market economy? No, really. Show of hands, loud and proud. Get them up. So we've got a split house. We've got half of you believe that we're onto something big, and we've got the rest of you in here who say, well, you know what? It's probably just another way to kind of put a fresh paint on the old house. I'm here to tell you, folks, that for those who don't believe that we're in the midst of something big, I'm going to be speaking a little bit about reasons that you might want to challenge your own thinking in that regard. Because I am of the belief that a lot of the traditional business models, the ways in which you've historically done business, they're about to be disrupted. And the disruption comes from the speed and the scale that is what is afforded today. Because I would argue with you that, agree with many of you that the tactics in terms of a lot of the things that we do, they're not going to materially change. The ways in which you try to tell your stories with emotion, connect with your customers, a lot of those principles still apply. But make no mistake about it, if you are not out there aggressively leveraging technology today, you are going to miss an opportunity because the speed and the scale with which you can accelerate and effectively create a multiplier effect is something you're going to miss out on. I'm here to tell you, and I'm going to give you a framework in terms of how to think about it, that this is not just about a technological movement. This is not about Facebook or Twitter or leveraging different digital media in a new and interesting way. There is a psychological shift in the marketplace that's happened because of social and the communities that it has created that has fundamentally changed the way in which they emotionally connect to other influencers and the ways in which they transact, the way in which they make their purchasing decisions. It's actually at a different level. And that's part of what I'd like to speak to you about. Now, clearly, as we think about technology, there are literally thousands and thousands of different companies who are out there trying to find their niche in terms of a special application to help you. But it's very important, and the reason I show this is because you cannot get lost in the clutter. It's very important not to forget that you are the storytellers, and ultimately what you are trying to do is emotionally connect to a customer so that you can be memorable, and at the end of the day, that you can inspire and connect with them. So let me kind of describe for you, I just touched on the fact that there's been a little bit of a shift. We're all consumers. Let me get a show of hands. We'll see if this 77 is right. How many folks, when you did an online purchase, whether it be, or were thinking about going to a restaurant or to stay in a hotel, how many folks actually went out there and researched a comment or two and looked for a peer evaluation? Can I just get a show of hands? Okay, I'm not Rain Man, I can't do quick math in the room, but it sure as hell feels a lot like at least 77%. So by the own show of hands, we all recognize that we are very much influenced by our peers. And I'm sure you've thought about that, why that is. We're going to talk a little bit about trust a little bit later. But let's face it, it's not that it's all of us against the man. But there's clearly something very different between your trust level with your peer versus your trust level with the company trying to sell you something. So if you're talking to a complete stranger who has shared values or a shared desire to purchase a product and/or service, you're going to be much more inclined to trust him or her than to trust the electronic brochureware of the company trying to peddle some published content in this new content marketing age that we all live in. But what's fascinating about it when you really get under the covers, now we all agree that we're able to be influenced. What's particularly fascinating is that the folks who are doing the influencing is a surprisingly smaller number of people than you think, at least the number of people who are doing it at scale. So I'm going to give you a quick article that I read not too long ago. It was written by a guy by the name of Bob Pearson. You guys can Google this while I'm babbling about it. So Bob Pearson is the founder of one of the leaders of the W2O Group, an agency. And one of the things that he explored is Harry Potter. It's a household name. It's known around the world. And he was able to leverage a technology and do the math and establish that all the conversations about Harry Potter, the millions and millions of conversations about Harry Potter, 90% of them are driven by 43 people. Now, I want you to just kind of register that for a moment. Really digest the power of what that means to you as a PR professional. Because if you're operating on a small PR budget and you happen to have to promote the next Harry Potter film, would you like to just target the marketplace, spray and pray, hoping that your target reached its designated audience? Or would you like to be very targeted about that and at least turn those 43 influencers driving 90% of the conversation, would you like to turn them into brand advocates? Would you like to get them excited about the merits of the forthcoming film? Perhaps invite them to New York City for their own special previewing and meet the cast and send movie posters to their home. What I'm beginning to shape for you folks is that influencer marketing is not just about identifying the influencer, but it's around creating brand advocates. It's about ways in which you don't just pay them X dollars to promote your product. That's not authentic. That's not going to survive in this space. But you can begin to think fundamentally differently about not only your ability to target, but how you conduct a lot of it is that, of what you do in terms of influence the marketplace, because you're trying to influence the influencers who are ultimately going to take your message, because we just saw a show of hands. They're the people that we all trust. Okay? So let's talk a little bit about trust. Where does trust come from? What does it mean to be an open business? Well, many of you have heard this before, that one of the things that's afforded through a lot of the social networks, this social experiment, this leveraging of communication networks that connects all of us, is about being transparent. The fact that we have an opportunity to be open, to be transparent, is very, very important in terms of the beginning of trust. In fact, it's this openness, it is the basis for respect and trust that is established largely in the digital sphere. Authenticity. Keeping it real. Let's face it, if you're too good or too shiny or too polished, or if it's too good to be true, guess what? It's too good to be true. And so companies who only seek to present their best face for all of us, oftentimes we're looking for the catch. And so what we'll talk about is the modern day company, and there's some recent work, Brian Solis and others, who are talking about companies effectively becoming their own media companies. We have to make sure that it is authentic, where we keep it real, where on our company website or in our company newsroom, you give the viewer, the potential customer, the opportunity to see the balance between that which is very good about you and then how perhaps you stack up in your industry. You've got to be able to not only show all that you have to offer in terms of your pearly whites, but you may have to show them a few warts. Because at the end of the day, in this very open, transparent world that we live in, your customers are going to seek it out anyway. And you are going to do far greater in terms of building a level of trust with them to the degree to which you are open, you are transparent, and that you are authentic. Let me touch on this final point around trust. There's a real game change. The game's being changed out in the marketplace. Simon Sinek, people familiar with Simon Sinek in the room? Anyone? Okay, so Simon Sinek's got a great video you can go check out. It's called Getting to Why. Okay, and when you check it out, one of the things he says is like the tagline. So I'll save you the video, but here's what it says. It says, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And the example that he uses in the video is Apple. And he talks about Apple as a company becomes associated with simple, easy to use, innovative. Those are the things that as a company, Apple comes to value. And people with like values come to trust that that's what Apple will stand for. And so with Apple's next product, what they can trust is that what Apple will deliver is a product that will be simple, easy to use, innovative. Now you may disagree about whether or not Apple fulfills that brand promise, but make no mistake about it. Those who associate those values with Apple will buy from Apple because of why they do what they do. So what you're seeing, folks, is that what's very, very important in this brave new world, particularly for all of you, particularly as you begin to think about influencer marketing, the establishment of trust that's built on a bedrock of transparency, authenticity, and shared values is something that many of you must very much be in tune to. That's where it begins. And once again, I appreciate that, particularly for some of my more seasoned professionals in the room, the things that I'm speaking about really haven't changed. What has changed is the degree to which the social communication networks are facilitating being called out, right? So you can't fool all the people all the time anymore. In fact, you can't fool anybody. It's the great equalizer between supplier power and consumer power. So this is interesting. In terms of the shift, in terms of who to trust, just kind of building back on that same point, believe it or not, there used to be a time in which those that we trusted were those in government. And you're going to laugh now. We used to trust those in government. We used to trust executive, I got to be careful what I say here. I got some of my guys, and you used to trust the CEO. But now what's happened, of course, is that those that we trust, we talked about it, all of us, we trust each other. My point in putting this slide on the page is that you have to recognize your power as an influencer. Not only are you influenced, but you've got that power. Movements have now been created because of our ability, our collective ability to take a stand, fight for a cause. And if there is merit to your cause, we all know that you can build an army behind you. It can be the people's choice. But what I'd like to do is to offer you, because I made this big, bold claim that it's not just about the technology, it's about the psychology. I talked to you about how there's this psychological shift in the way in which we all have formed communities with one another. I'm going to use the word tribes here in the moment. But it is fascinating to think that for all of you as PR professionals, you're really in the communication business. And as you think about it, since the dawn of time, right, back when man was in the cave, with his stone tablets, she felt the great desire to communicate, to tell the stories. In fact, as you think about it, over time, there's been obviously different technological advancements, whether you're talking about the printing press or the birth of the modern day television, or as you move through time, and so, over half of the room probably weren't around when the internet exploded. I remember I was a pre-internet guy. I'm a digital immigrant, not a digital native, so I speak with an accent. But what you should know is that here in the last decade or so, with the emergence of mobile, right? So we all have tablets, we all have smartphones, we are all connected, we all have a voice, we all can share it, we've established that. And now with the age of the social, it really comes together where as you put the technologies together, what does it all mean? We find ourselves in this age of influence. And we've been talking a little bit about that. One thing that strikes me though, guys, is that, anyone have a tablet in the room? Would you hold up your tablet? Isn't it amazing that as sophisticated, thank you, isn't as sophisticated as we've become as a society? We started with tablets and now we're back to tablets. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? So what I'd like to do, just to kind of talk a little bit about the psychology, is to kind of walk you through a framework, really that examines a shift in the way in which communications, right? We're all communications professionals. And what I'd like to do is to talk about that in the context of audience, which is really our roles, psych, which is our mindsets, our needs, our emotional satisfaction, our messages, what are the communications that work, and then finally, as you begin to think about share of market, we're really talking about the ways in which businesses were able to establish share of market. And what I'd like to do in less than 3 minutes is compare and contrast the evolution of this psychology. So back in the Leave It to Beaver days, right, back when television was first born, right, it was an interesting time because the audience was us. What we're trying to show here is the old black and white. Family would huddle around the old black and white TV. It was all around what was our mindset. Our mindset was very much around family. Our needs, our emotional satisfaction were really conforming to those commercials that were forced on us. And it was very much around messages that were persuasive, highly targeted, and the companies that could afford to pay for those commercials became all that we interacted with in terms of brands, in terms of the message, in terms of the ability to influence. And so what you have is that your share of market really became a function of share and voice, where the bigger companies with bigger budgets being able to pay for the advertising, they ultimately became the brands that we interacted with. But it was interesting because the me decades began. So I can certainly relate to this, right? So when the internet was born, right, this was supposed to be the great equalizer. I could get anything that I wanted all at my fingertips. I could find out whatever I wanted, and for a lot of PR professionals and marketers and advertising type, they thought, wow, finally, the ability to truly target, truly segment, and I can really lock in on this person. Right place, right message, right time, right person. We've all heard it. And so this me ecosystem began to develop. This world, this bubble around me, it was all about me, and it was all about companies trying to tailor to me. Not a bad place to be, right? There's rewards programs, and people were examining my behavior. And so our psyche became this me ecosystem. The needs were all about the stimulation of me, whether it be in my new video games or the new devices or gadgets, the new rewards program. Everything is tailored to me. And the messages were sought to be engaging because people were looking to connect with you, right? It was very much a push, hoping that you would respond. And share a market became a function of your share of connectivity. The things that you were able to connect with that helped you realize or be stimulated within your world. Well, that wasn't that long ago, guys. In fact, a lot of this probably resonates to you, and a lot of you are probably thinking to yourself, well, geez, that's not so bad. Not a bad world to be in. It's all about me. But let's talk about the way in which the world is beginning to shift, because remember, I said there's a psychological movement that's beginning to take place. There is a human behavior now around community that is beginning to unfold. And I want you to think about your own experiences. And so as you begin to think about it in tribe, this notion of tribe, those who come together, form together, who are passionate, where there's a certain level of kinship with one another, right? This notion of me, a little lonely, right? But now this opportunity today with the birth of the social networks, this opportunity to get back and not just to view ourselves as individuals, but to see that we were part of broader communities. But we get to select those communities. These communities are those that around shared interests, shared values, things that we are passionate about. And you must adhere to sort of the rules of the pack, right? So for those in social, you know that there's a certain way to behave even as you tweet. You got to give to get. You can't be that guy out there saying, hey, I'm new to Twitter and I want this from you. It's not about you anymore. There is also this notion around we're all part of something bigger. Wikipedia was born. We all comment, we all share, we all post. We all support each other's education, each other's understanding, and we rally around and form small little groups, little communities that become who we are. But we're all dimensioned in multiple different ways. I may care about a particular charity, and I will form and have shared values, let's say, around cancer. And I will become part of groups and I will get involved. That's a part of my life. I may have children, and there might be aspects of my children's lives where I form communities. We all have little sub-communities then that we are passionate about. And so what you start to see is there's a need around belonging. The message, the communications that are working are around joining the different clubs, the different communities. And then finally, your share of market becomes a share of trust. Trusting that each other will do right within those communities. And so getting back to the power of influence, and once again, I promised it wouldn't be more than 3 minutes, it's very important to know that as you think about influence then, as you think about these tribes that we're all a part of, the emotion that's now a part of it and this sense of belonging that's part of it become absolutely critical to your ability to influence or to be able to help your clients influence in this brave new world. You're going to find that the game now has changed and that it's no longer just about company to customer. It must be around company providing the emotional elements for the storytelling so that the influencer can influence in an authentic, transparent way. So how many of you agree with this statement? A show of hands, influencer marketing. This says that in 2013, about half of you will budget for influencer marketing. Can I just see if this is about accurate? Show it. Oh, we're a little bit light. That doesn't look like 50%. Okay, so influencer marketing may not be as budgeted here. But, what do you call it? What should I be saying?
Well, we started consumer-facing events for this year, which is what I would put in that category.
Okay, fair enough.
Experiential marketing. Experiential, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So maybe there's a different, thank you for sharing, by the way. Maybe there's a different expression for it, and once again, I think you're raising an excellent point. What I am talking about, of course, is not limited to the digital space. Hopefully what you're taking away from this, or at least one of the elements that you're taking away from this, is that there is an element here where it's emotional. You're understanding that there's an element of storytelling involved in this, that the content that we're creating as marketers cannot be this shiny, polished, only what we do great type of, because at the end of the day, that content's not going to be relevant and authentic. Okay, so I work for Marketwired, and we've got this fantastic technology, and one of the things that we're able to do when we listen and monitor and engage with customers, we can actually go out and check 200 billion conversations across our data set, and we're able to actually go check out mentions of people to determine what I saw earlier. What we did is we went and said, where can I find any suggestions, any recommendations? Does anyone know? And so what we were really trying to prove, folks, is the degree to which all of us are actively engaged, where Google has become a verb, and we're absolutely looking and leveraging one another. And so as we begin to think about what makes for an effective influence, right? So I've spoken a lot about connecting with your influencers. But how do you do that? What matters? It's not as simple as you think. In fact, we've got some very sophisticated PhDs who spend a lot of time building algorithms, thinking about what are the right data elements about all of us to be able to understand our degree to influence on any particular topic. A number of folks that I've spoken to here at this conference, we've spent some time talking about what some of the drivers are. And they talk about frequency, they talk about reach, they talk about relevance, they talk about resonance. But it's the ability to be able to capture them in a meaningful way, that what you come back with is predictive, and it's, I'm going to use the word dynamic. And here's what I mean by dynamic. It's very, very important when you seek to identify your influencers that it really be around topic. So there are some other companies out there who go and create a score that attempt to capture your ability to influence in a score. But trust me, if you're asking me about snowboarding, I'm not going to be able to influence. I don't know a lick about snowboarding. But if you ask me about carpentry, my father was a carpenter, and like it or not, I know perhaps more than I care to know about carpentry. So if you have the ability to fine-tune and say, what's Jim's ability to influence as it relates to carpentry based on his domain knowledge, his relevance, his experience, et cetera, you might say high in carpentry and very, very low in snowboarding. And none of us would agree that one size fits all, that one number for me says this is my score and this is my power to influence. It's simply not practical. So a lot of what we've been working on is how do we build those algorithms that are dynamic, allowing you to fine-tune by topic, and also predictive in terms of their ability to truly measure your ability to influence. Now let's try and take a step back and think about why that matters. If you are a marketer, or if you are a PR professional, or if you are an advertising professional, you really want to be able to understand that, look, I'd like to really zero in on those mothers who are most influential about recommending diapers. Because I work for Pampers, and I want to make sure that I can plug into those influencers because I've got this hot new diaper that doesn't leak and it's got great adhesive, et cetera. Probably in over my head at this point. But hopefully you can appreciate what I'm saying, that the ability to fine-tune is absolutely critical to your ability to influence around a topic. And that part of our ability to get social ROI in the moment has largely been a function of failed technology that has not been dynamic enough around the topic and precise enough to be predictive. And so all I am attempting to do with this slide, hopefully now you can see it, is that these are some of the things that become very, very important, from location, relevance, resonance, activity, interest, tone. And we'd be happy and delighted to tell you more about that at our booth, but I'm just trying to give you a flavor as you think about influence. The next thing I'd like to really talk about, there's a new product that just came out from Google. That's a pretty hot product called Ripple. And Ripple is intended to show that when you, let's say you tweet something, let's understand the information dispersion, is what the smart guys call it, right? It's this notion of what is the first and second and third order in which your signal attenuates or your message propagates to a marketplace. And so in a way, you want to be able to measure that because once again, if you're truly to identify the right influencers, you want to do so in a way where you can say, heck, I deliver a message, and if I pick up Stacy, it really takes off. So imagine a heat map, right? You've all seen the weather maps over the last 36 hours and you see the clouds strolling in. What if you could actually see your message going out and watch the dispersion of that and see it get really read through certain nodes, influencers, and see it picked up, and the ability to not only monitor but to be able to measure the impact of that communication, and then ultimately tie it to some desired outcome, right? So as PR professionals, the ability to measure is often one of the greatest challenges for all of you. So as you begin to think about influencer marketing, once again, whether it be in the digital space or not, you've got to be thinking about what is the end game, what is the desired behavior or outcome on the other side, and then how do you best get at it? Once again, back to Harry Potter, how do I identify those 43 people driving 90% of the conversation and turn them into brand advocates? So I'm just trying to give all of you a flavor on a way to think about it, but this isn't a tomorrow world, this is a today world. In fact, this slide by McKinsey is really around the decision journey. And one of the things I'd ask all of you to think about is that it's not about identifying the influencers. We've got to stop talking about the influencers. What we've really got to start thinking about are the brand advocates. Because the difference there is that it's not, the game's not over just by identifying the influencer. In fact, it's just begun. Now it's about the content that you produce. Is it emotionally charged? Does it offer some sort of insight or emotional connection that when they take it, they become the hero, and at the end of the day, they become the influencer whose voice is heard that we all go to about that purchase decision? And so you begin to think about that in the context for many of you is what steps have been taken as we think about our end customer. Where are they consuming information? What voices are valued in terms of the influence? Who's trusted? And then very importantly, are you delivering the right message with the right context? Because we all know that when you show up to actually make your purchasing decision, a lot of the selling is done, right? So you've already gone to the internet, and a lot of times you've researched the product, you've done the price comparisons, et cetera, et cetera. And by the time you get to the purchasing decision, you're now thinking about what everyone else's experience is in terms of what was said, billeted by way of feature functionality about the product. I literally just 2 days ago was in a Babies R Us looking for a new baby seat. I've got a 9-month-old at home. And my better half had spent a lot of time comparing a lot of the different, once again, leveraging the internet, Googling this, and said, okay, I've got to narrow down to the top 5 choices. So she collected her information. The very next step, of course, was what? She went to read reviews. And she just started piling through the reviews and then started matching, well, what the company said about their product, is that what the experience was? And there's nothing about what I'm saying that's new. This is the world that we live in today. You wouldn't even fathom now making a decision that was not only informed by the prospective supplier, but now you're thinking about, this is my trusted tribe, man. This is my community. Now, here's the part of the conversation that's going to start to sound more like PR, right? Because we're going to start talking about like shared media and owned media and earned media and paid media, right? So now you guys are waking up. Saying, oh, okay, I get it. I'm in the right room. It's about our ability. We talked before about the impressions. I just gave you the baby example, right? I want you to understand, I talked about speed and I talked about scale and I've talked about this tribal community that's at play. So think about paid and then think about the opportunity for earned. Think about scale, think about speed. 500 billion consumer-generated impressions about products. That was back in 2011. That's pretty staggering, guys. Think about it if you had to go create those number of impressions through paid media. Just think about that. 70% of online users, we said that they were actually acting on this information. So not only are we all producing it, we're all acting on it. And we think 70% is light based on the own empirical data, statistically insignificant sample that I conducted on behalf of 100 people. And that offers through advocates. We talked about advocates. We talked about it's not just about identifying those influencers. How do you make them passionate about your brand? Getting to the why, the shared values. And so you're now talking about the conversion rate being 4 to 10 times as high. I hope I'm bringing it home now, guys, where we're shifting from you guys as a consumer to you guys as PR professionals, beginning to see the power and the magic behind the ability to be able to leverage. Call it influencer marketing. I don't care what you call it. Call it brand advocate marketing. You're in the storytelling business. You're looking to inspire. You're looking to drive a behavioral outcome on the other side. All right, finally, let's start getting into some stories. Okay, so got a couple of use cases. These are customers of Marketwired. And what I'd like to do is now I want to talk about the first step. The first step of influencing is listening. Listening to your customers, listening to the audience. So what I'd like to do is very quickly give you a quick story. So Google is one of our customers. We're very proud of that, very humbled by that. And they were actually out there looking to, in the technology business, there's this thing, of course, we've all heard it, first mover advantage. You want to be out with the next best thing. And you want your next best thing to be better than the next guy's next best thing. And so how do you do that? So from a product design and development, you want to be fastest to market, so you got to start thinking about things like cycle time. And how is it that you can conduct your own sort of focus group of billions of people very quickly to get that information categorized, filtered, consumed, so that you could serve it up to your product design and development team. And so with the Nexus tablet, they used our technology, this listening monitoring technology, to be able to go out and find out what people valued. Did they want the rounded edges or the backlighting, or was it more important to have a stand? Because the technology team needed to make decisions because they needed to lock down the code by next week so they can get into production. So the first step, folks, of your ability to influence begins with listening to your customers. Intel, this is another customer of ours, and I'm just now going to shift a little bit from product design and development. Now we're going to talk a little bit about market positioning, product positioning. And so Intel was looking at the market and saying, geez, it sure would be interesting for us to really understand what are some of the frustrations, what are some of the pain points, and what are folks really saying about their experience? Because remember, they keep it real in the digital space. They tweet, they post, they blog, they say what's on their mind, and they keep it real. So if you could literally get the verbatims, and once again, speed is of the essence, speed and scale, plus a psychological movement, a new market reality that we're living in. So for them, they were trying to juxtapose Laptop, tablet. And how did the two come together? And in their particular case, they developed a tagline that said a laptop when you need it, a tablet when you want it. Because what they were really able to tap into is that we felt very differently when we positively had to get the thing up and running. You pop something, well, that's it. Everybody's got tablets. All right, but you get the point. It really helped them with some of their marketing position. They use this marketing positioning statement today. So let's talk about Kingsford. Because it's not only your opportunity, how do you build brand advocates? How do you do that? So what if you were the person, the PR professional who had the Kingsford brand? And it's getting a little cold. Here we are in Philadelphia. It's almost winter time. And you just need to go create some buzz. You need to create a personality for Kingsford. You need to go create some level of endearment around it. You wanted to open the door for future engagement. So let me tell you what Kingsford did. They began to think very differently about building customer advocates. So they decided that, a little bit out of context, there is often this association that bad kids get coal for Christmas. Okay, stay with me. This is a pretty interesting story. So they decided to leverage, once again, going out and listening to the customers. We were able to do some keywords, and we were able to identify, believe it or not, you're going to like the irony of this, the nicest guy in social media. So we were able to go in and look across, billions of conversations and identify that person who was most often connected to words like good and manners and you name it, in the context of everybody else. We were also able to kind of look at it in terms of a second order and say, this guy was also a char grill, he liked to grill, so that was actually a plus. So we found the combination of the nicest person in social media who was an avid griller. And so we found this gentleman. Okay, so this is some of the stuff that we went through. And there he is, Clifford Brown. And so for the holiday season last year, we backed up the truck with 200 pounds of Kingsford charcoal. But now think about it, the whole notion. And of course, there was lots of photo ops. They leveraged social media to be able to get the story out. It was picked up in a number of different ways. And each of you right now, perhaps, is starting to think a little bit differently about Kingsford charcoal. Maybe, just maybe, we've begun to transform it from sort of that product we buy in the summertime when we want to grill to say, maybe this brand's got a little bit of personality. I like the way they were thinking. It's kind of fun. And now I can begin to emotionally connect with that brand and just see it very, very differently. In fact, I might even begin to cross that line. If you do a few more clever campaigns like this, you may actually start to become an advocate in a sense by telling this story. Okay. What I'm now trying to do is to tell you that it's not limited to Madison Avenue. So let's just kind of talk about the power of social, because every company out there is not only thinking about it from a PR perspective, this part will be fast. Netflix, you may have seen it earlier in the year, Reed Hastings, who is their CEO, was so excited about the fact that they had just passed their 1 billionth viewing hour on behalf of their movies, that he immediately went to Facebook, right, Deirdre? He went to Facebook, and he posted the fact that they had just passed their 1 billionth viewing hour. Well, you can imagine the markets picked that up, and those who were in tune with that social media delivered message, they started to trade on it, and then it became a big controversy as to whether or not the SEC felt it was fair in terms of, well, not every investor and analyst has access to social media. The point here is that they later came back and said, well, wait a second, times they are a-changing. For you young kids, that's a Bob Dylan reference. And so much so that the SEC has now said that social media is very much a viable channel for things like disclosure, financial disclosure. And so what we're now beginning to experience is that as you begin to think about telling your story, guess what? You know how there's this big question whether advertisers or marketers or PR professionals, who owns social? Well, guess what? Now you got the IRO going, wait a second. I might be getting into that conversation because I have an opportunity to manage the way in which people think and feel about my company, and those people are analysts and investors. So all I'm trying to demonstrate for all of you is the way in which you storytell, the way in which you influence is not limited to Madison Avenue. It's not just on Main Street with the Clifford Browns. We're now at a point where Wall Street's going to start getting into the mix, because there's a great opportunity for investor relations officers now to begin to think fundamentally different about their investor community, their analyst community, and their ability to, dare I say, act like a marketer and storytell to build some sort of allegiance or following. And it can begin with listening, right? You're about to do your next earnings call. Let me go in and see what the analysts and the investors are saying about us. I wonder what their hot buttons are. Are they upset that the executives have executive compensation right now despite poor performance of the company? And to really be able to tune in on that message. So when we talk about the power of influence, it's not limited to those in the room. And as I said, it's not limited to Main Street, Madison Avenue, but now Wall Street's getting into the mix. And this was a few weeks ago. Perhaps you've seen this tweet when Twitter filed for their IPO. They tweeted about it. A great illustration of the fact that you can, in fact, use social. Okay, now this next piece is really to show you how it all comes together. But before I begin, let me just kind of get a show of hands. How many folks are very familiar with the Dove campaign? Okay, this is going to be easy. All right, so the Dove campaign actually began circa 2004, 2006, in which they were very quick to realize that the positioning of their brand was no longer going to be around their products. It was going to be more around the emotional connection and the value that they could create in helping women, daughters, and mothers begin to see themselves differently, right? So this idea of self-esteem, and they began to change a conversation between the way in which women viewed themselves in a much more positive way, much more in line with how others viewed them. And so there've been a number of campaigns over the years. It began, I'm not going to play it for you, but perhaps you're familiar with this one, right? Everybody's familiar with this one, right? So in this clip, I'm not going to play it. You see this woman, very attractive as she is, get completely distorted and then become a billboard. And so this view of what true beauty is becomes completely distorted and becomes the standard. And so Dove began with spots like this back in 2006 to begin to recast and drive a conversation about what really mattered. And it was no longer about living up to the billboard, but it was about being true to yourselves and for you to see yourselves in an entirely different way. So Dove has had this notion of a campaign that focuses in on this idea of helping women with their self-esteem. That goes back to 2006, 2004. This spot is from this year. Let's talk about the difference now. Let's talk about the ability now to have women and younger girls engage in conversations, share their feelings, share their thoughts, and get a perspective about their own self-esteem. And look at the way they were able to emotionally connect at a level that allowed these young ladies and older women to be able to talk about the issues that matter. Dove's in the background, and you can't help but walk away thinking fundamentally different about Dove as a brand, and on a subliminal level beginning to think about the fact that they become associated with you, seeing the more beautiful side of yourself. But let's put that now in the PR perspective, right? Because there's a lot they could have done in terms of buying paid media impressions. And so when you think about the fact it's the most viewed online video ever, 163 million, 4.6 billion media impressions, I want you to take in the scale and the speed that this happened this year. And then let's put it in perspective. 30 times earned media value versus paid media, and they expect profits this year to be about 500 million. Once again, guys, I'm just trying to make the point that there is a new market reality here, and I'm just using Dove, which has become a case study, to really drive home the point They started this thing 10 years ago. They don't have the speed and the scale that they have now. They were able to strike an emotional chord, create a connection, tell a story that all of you who became brand advocates for them, you told their story. Okay, so remember, this is the close. What we're talking about here in terms of the power of influence, it's spanning from Madison Avenue to Wall Street to Main Street. It applies for all of us because at the end of the day, the all of us is us, and we all acknowledge the fact that we are part of a broader community and we're able to be influenced. All of us have a voice and we share that voice. All of us have an opportunity to create our own impression around a product and or a service. Your ability to harness the power is not only your ability to identify those influences, we've talked about that before, but how do you optimize, you tailor the content, create some actionable insight, reinforce a shared purpose. We've talked about that in the case of Dove, obviously, this notion, this idea about true beauty and self-esteem. And then how do you maximize the content and the resonance? It's very important that you create customer intimacy. We talked about the Kingsford charcoal brand. You can actually do it and really break some molds and break some paradigms in terms of the way people view it as, oh, it's just something you run down to the store and buy to put into your grill. Okay, so I'm hoping to challenge you a little bit. Find advocates, not your target audience. It doesn't stop at identifying your influencers. And then how do you increase your influencers' social capital, their ability, the currency? How do you make them, how do you provide them the content that's going to allow them to be the hero, for them to be the storytellers? You know, the young mother who can't wait to share that video that you just saw with her girlfriend, she in fact becomes a customer advocate for you. Okay, guys, thank you all very much. If you want to hang and ask questions, that's awesome. If you got to roll, you got to roll. But it's been a real pleasure to spend some time with you.